So it turns out the entire airfield was on fire. That's my takeaway from some of these most recent clips. Now, Ukraine continues to claim that they struck 41 different Russian aircraft during Operation Spiderweb a couple days ago. And today, we've got quite a bit more footage showing that that number is higher than expected and may actually be approaching 41. I mean, right here, you can see the satellite imagery of what happened after some of these strikes. Those used to be Tu-22s. No longer. But nonetheless, let's get started with this video just released a few moments ago by Ukraine's SBU. Now, right out the gate, we're seeing Tu-95 bombers. Oh, by the way, AWACS plane, A-50 coming up. 2 of them appear to have been hit in this little montage. A couple key notes when looking at these Tu-95 bombers. First off, they're the oldest of the group we're going to be looking at today, have not been in production for a long time in Russia, so it's very hard to repair these and manufacture new parts or manufacture new aircraft from the start. Now, the tires that you're seeing on top of these aircraft aren't really designed to protect them from the actual drone strike, as, oh, that wing just fell off, didn't it? They're more designed to break up the silhouette of the aircraft for AI. So if you're flying overhead, clearly these drones and even satellite imagery, you can tell that it is a plane. But my understanding is, starting a few years ago, the idea was break up the silhouette with these tires, make it harder for AI-assisted platforms to strike home. Now, in this attack, AI was... Oh, there's a Tu-22. And I feel like we see a lot of these in this video. Earlier today, Russian accounts said 12 total aircraft were destroyed. That's what we can confirm. Tell you what, I feel like a lot more than 12 are getting hit in this video. Maybe some of these are not detonating or something, but when it zooms out every so often and you see the scope of the destruction along this airfield, it's insane. AN-12, I believe, it's a cargo plane. Something else to keep in mind here. Look at that. Holy cow. There we go. A-50. AWACS type plane, so airborne early warning system. This helps Russia to provide guidance for offensive missile attacks and to detect incoming strikes, be it from missiles or long-range drones. So the elimination of these, I believe at one point at their peak, Russia had 6 of these. Very expensive, very technologically advanced radar planes is the best way to put it. There's only so many of Russia. Again, I think they had 6 at their peak. One was damaged in Belarus at the start of the war. My understanding was like only 3 or 4 were actually operational, which is normal. There's most aircraft. No Air Force in the entire world has 100% of their platforms fully operational. My understanding was 3 or 4 of those A-50s were operational, so this would bring Russia down, if those strikes were effective, down to 1, maybe 0 total. Now, the location of the strikes here is interesting. In each one of these platforms, you see they're not just ramming into different places along the plane. They're all targeting the similar areas over and over again. So on the Tu-22, right there on the very top, just above the cockpit. On the Tu-95, you saw them going right after where the wing attaches to the fuselage. And in the A-50, they're going after the radar sitting on top. This was... Ukraine put this together. There's a mix of manual piloting for these aircraft. Each one of these drones had their own dedicated Ukrainian pilot that was operating it over a cellular network all the way back in Ukraine. There was also an AI assist mode here as well, our understanding, to not clear exactly what the point was, if it was the final strike portion or the overall identification of the aircraft. But nonetheless, Ukraine utilized overhead imagery from Russian museums. So some of these planes sit in museums like we have in the United States to help train their AI for what to hit and where, kind of identifying some of the weak spots on the aircraft. As we get to the back portion of this video, and I'll link the original in the description below for anybody who wants it, you can start to see, there we go, just the scope of the destruction. It gets harder and harder for the unintended consequence here. A little harder for the drones to actually strike their targets when there's so much smoke in the air. But you can see that they're going after places like fuel tanks, propellers, the attachment for the wing to the fuselage, and the hard points for where missiles would be attached. There was a rumor that there may have been missiles attached to these aircraft when they were hit. I've not seen that in any of these clips. Big explosions, but that doesn't necessarily mean, it's hard to tell from a passing explosion if there was a missile or two involved in that, or if it was just a fuel tank or it was just an aircraft. But there you go. That's what happens to aircraft when they're hit with drones. Holy cow. And you'll see, we'll go through some satellite imagery here in a minute. There's nothing left of some of these. So, God. pretty significant. Now we're going to get into kind of the only U.S. response we've heard from this so far, and the bottom line is we're not very well prepared to deal with this. But before getting into that, I do want to shift over to some of the satellite imagery. This one's coming out of Olenia Air Base, and you can see just kind of zoomed out, we've got a Tu-160 there that appears to have not been hit, and then Tu-95s and an AN-12 that were destroyed. We're starting to get more and more of this imagery come out, and the next couple are actually zoomed in, and it shows the scope of the, there's nothing left. All right, that's what happened to these aircraft. So it's not as though like minor dents and small damages. When Ukraine hit these in just a way to where there's nothing to be repaired at all. Like you spray that thing off the pavement and start over. That's what remains of these. God, you can kind of see the outline on that one on the right. It's an old Tu-95. Gone. Erased. Nothing is salvageable from this. Now, a couple key points I want to talk to in terms of this overall operation. There's got to be a concern inside of Russia that not all of these cargo trucks have yet been located, as in these were parked just outside a couple Russian airfields. The drones took off, did, as we can see in this clip, pretty significant damage to the Russian Air Force. There's no telling that those were the only drone launch platforms anywhere throughout the entire country of Russia. So a question, no doubt, causing sleepless nights to a handful of people in the Kremlin and hopefully around the world. Hopefully, we're learning from this here in the United States, is that they've got to figure out some way to better defend their airfields and sensitive targets because these trucks could be anywhere at this point. Oh, speaking of drones, we got an ongoing fundraiser. We're almost there, 60,000 raised of a $70,000 goal in like a week because you guys are incredibly generous. This is through Ukraine Aid Operations, where we're getting some ground and recon drones for the 3rd Assault Brigade as well as the 13th Artillery Brigade. This organization, which is a registered 501c3 nonprofit, so it's a tax deductible donation, and they're incredibly transparent. They've set up a couple different interviews for this fundraiser, and yesterday, actually, I got to talk with one of the commanders of a dedicated Ukrainian drone battalion. Everything from FPV all the way to long-range 300-kilometer-plus strike drones. That interview should be coming out later today or tomorrow. I think it's really interesting in light of some of these recent operations. But nonetheless, if interested and able, the link to contribute to that fundraiser is in the description below. With that, back to the video. And to that, I want to play a clip from the United States, from the White House, our press secretary yesterday, answering a question about this that I just want to drive home. I don't think we're ready for this type of attack. This is the kind of thing that genuinely has changed how warfare is conducted. But let's listen to Caroline Leavitt real quick from the White House.
What is President Trump doing to ensure that a similar internal drone attack doesn't happen here in the US, given this was done at pretty low cost, very stealthily? It obviously raises questions about our own security, particularly for US aircraft here.
It absolutely does, and that's why the president nominated Secretary Hegseth and has approved some of the changes that have been made at the Pentagon to ensure that we have the most lethal fighting force in the world, and that the United States military is the best, the biggest. That's why he wants the One Big Beautiful Bill to be passed, because it increases our defense spending. It's why he also launched the announcement of the Golden Dome to prevent from missile strikes and attacks in the future. And the president has a full understanding, I can tell you, because I've spoken to him about it, about the future of warfare and how drones are a big part of that. And I will not get ahead of our policy team, but I think you can expect to see some executive action on that front in the very near future.
So here's the deal. To be blunt, none of that addressed the issue whatsoever. We are not prepared for this type of attack. Now, fortunately, and I feel like this is something that most folks aren't appreciating, Ukraine is so far ahead in this aspect of warfare that it's not like Russia even could pull this off, in the next couple of weeks or months, or China. This, again, the concept of moving these drones in, assembling them in a foreign country that where you're wanted, right? These are Ukrainians in Russia putting this together, and then setting up these launch platforms, connecting the drones to a local cellular network and finding specific military targets that were less guarded than others, and then operating those remotely from another country simultaneously at 4 different locations in Russia. That's not simple. That is not easy. And I don't know that there's another country right now that could pull this off anytime soon. It's going to take a lot of trial and error to get there. That said, the solution here is not to find those trucks, right? Or add more electronic warfare to some of the bases. We've seen how some of the drones have started using fiber optic cables. That removes any possibility of them being downed by electronic warfare means. So if one of these was, say, outside of a United States air base right now, they could launch and they could do significant damage, and we wouldn't have an awful lot to do about it. The reason I say that is, yes, our air bases have radar. They probably have some degree of electronic warfare jammers as well. These drones were operating on a cell network, so you've got to factor that piece in. Again, even if you get around that, maybe they find a way to, maybe they're using these fiber optic drones. They're picked up on radar. Again, most radars in the, inside the United States are looking for larger items, but let's say they're looking for some of the smaller ones here as well, and they pick up those quadcopters. How many effective surface-to-air munitions do we have at all of our air bases around the country? There were 171 drones launched during this attack. And how many of those are going to get through? And the answer today is quite a few, because we are not set up to try to defend against this type of thing. So right now we have yet to hear from President Trump, Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Rubio, or Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth on this issue. This is the best we've got from the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying, well, we're the best military in the world. And to be honest, right now, this is a major vulnerability to U.S. forces around the world. Any airfield, any military base, anywhere around the world is susceptible today to this type of attack. Now, in terms of what could be done to mitigate the damage, we have to look at the front lines in Ukraine and how are the two sides defending against these drones. And of course, there's the electronic warfare piece. You try to set up a bubble to where they can't get in at all. But if they do manage to break through that, and electronic warfare is not end-all be-all, it's one tool in the kit, we then have short-range weapons like shotguns that are being used to shoot these down, the FPVs, and then we've got nets, protective nets, or fencing is kind of the last line of defense. And it works. We've seen drone nets pop up over key roads in eastern Ukraine to prevent drone strikes against vehicles that are traveling along common routes. It would not be the craziest thing in the world to set up some cheap netting over strategic air bases here in the United States or strategic locations. So even if those drones do make it through, they're not going to be able to. It's a simple thing. And all of a sudden the drones can't get through that net, right? For all the technology involved here, a simple net hanging over a trench line means the drone can't get all the way down to the target. That is the kind of thing we would need, and we would need it across, again, all of the strategic targets that could be identified in the United States and abroad. That is not a short fix, or I guess all things considered, compared to some other options, it is relatively quick, but that's the kind of thing we need to get moving on now. This should be concerning for people across the U.S. government and for governments all around the world. Another key note here is that what we just watched was Ukraine take out Russian strategic aviation. These drones could hit any target. Right? They could park at the Kremlin and just go after senior Russian officials as they exit for the day. They could park at a naval base and go after the naval vessels. They could park at a training facility and just hit every one of the military barracks. Think of the places that they could go and they could do to affect this. Think of how much damage could be done inside of a country if you just open up the back of a truck and, let's see, 4 locations, 170 drones, so 40 drones on or about come flying out the back with explosive charges. Think of the damage, the devastation that could be done in so many places around the world with that capability. That is the thing that no doubt Russia is losing sleep over right now, and hopefully countries around the world are really paying attention. Nonetheless, we continue to wait for the Russian response. They continue to kind of talk a big game, that something big is going to happen. Their mill bloggers are starting to get more and more frustrated, saying it will come, I think, maybe. It'll come as fast as I think it was fighter bomber. Said it'll come just like the fall of capitalism and the objectives being reached of the special military operation. A little sarcasm. It's his way of saying, why on earth is this thing that was promised not actually happening? Nonetheless, we are still expecting probably a pretty significant response from Russia to this attack, and then, of course, the one yesterday against the Kerch Bridge. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.